partners with Egypt. Also, I would like to welcome His Excellency Mr. Sanjeev Bhattacharya, Ambassador of India, for being with us today. Welcome, His Excellency, with me. The officials from the Egyptian side, we are honored to have with us a representative from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mrs. Reham Khalid, Council of Asian Affairs Division. We have also Dr. Noha Ahmed Salah, First Secretary, Asia Department.
Friends in Egypt, that our relation with India did not start today. It was flourishing when Nehru and Nasser were the leaders of the two countries, and it never stopped. And today we have to congratulate India that it is not the largest, nearly closing to be the largest inviting investment in India. That means that their government decisions or the government way to deal is very smooth, not like us, actually. We have a very difficult government way. We have to improve it. But in India, there are opportunities and there are inviting and succeeding in inviting international investments. That's why we congratulate India, and we have to follow what they are doing. I don't want to talk too much. I'm just having to say that the Egyptian government is very interested by this meeting. That's why it's presented by quite a few top people from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and from GAFI, and we hope that at the end of the day we can conclude something positive for the future. Thank you.
The Assistant Foreign Minister for Asian Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I start his speech on his behalf. The Egyptian-Indian relations go a long way back, and it is not merely limited to the excellent relations, friendship and solidarity between its two charismatic leaders, Gamal Abdel Nasser and Jawad al-Nafo, but to centuries of exchange of thoughts and trade between the various nations and empires that grew on the banks of the Nile and the Ganga. And of course, the exchange of writings between Saad al-Nuri and Mahatma Gandhi, the two great leaders committed to freedom and independence from Egypt and India. While political relations between our two countries have always been excellent throughout the years, this year, ladies and gentlemen, marks a historic turn in strengthening these relations. As you may well know, a flurry of high-ranking Indian officials have visited Egypt in the past few months alone. Whether be it the visit by the Indian Minister of Road Transport, Highways and Shipping to participate in the inauguration of the new Suez Canal on behalf of India's Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, or the visit by Her Excellency Sushma Swaraj, Indian Minister of External Affairs last August, to strengthen the bilateral relations. These visits helped to create a momentum that culminated with the participation of His Excellency President Sisi in the third India-African Forum Summit that took place in New Delhi last October, where his meeting with the Indian Prime Minister set forth a course for more interaction between our two countries in the various fields of politics, economics, trade, and culture. In continuation with this excellent momentum in our political relations, we are now preparing for the bilateral committee, which will be held in New Delhi next January, and co-chaired by both our ministers of foreign affairs of our two nations. In preparation for this committee, the next round of our Foreign Office consultations will also be held in New Delhi next month. As both countries are at the forefront in the quest to raise the status and dignity of the developing world and seek the well-being and prosperity of its peoples, the opportunities for strengthening our relations in the economic and trade fields are boundless. India now ranks almost at the one of the largest investors in Egypt, with over than 50 Indian companies and corporations flying their trade throughout the country. Many of those established companies seek to expand their investment in Egypt, while many other companies have expressed their need to establish operations in Egypt as well. Egypt also has started investing in India, with the presence of 2 major Egyptian corporations already starting and working there. Several more Egyptian investors as well have expressed their interest to join in the vast Indian domestic market. The fields of cooperation between our 2 nations are vast and include, but not limited to, the fields of agriculture, consumer goods, textiles, machinery, automobile, and manufacturing. I let, of course, my colleague at the Egyptian Commercial Service will talk more about the trade between our 2 countries. We are as well hoping to expand other areas of cooperation in the field of education, scientific and human research by covering new dimensions of cooperation through the India-African dialogue, and Egypt is a main gateway to Africa. As for cultural relations, people-to-people context between our 2 nations have always been present, with our various cultural exchanges in literature, arts, and tourism. People of both nations have always had an infatuation with each other's cultures and the rich civilization that each nation possesses. A notable example would be India hosting its India by the Nile Festival for the 3rd time running. Not to mention as well the participation of several Egyptian cultural groups in events in India and the ongoing efforts to promote Egyptian civilization and culture in India. Such acts are helping to pave the way for the rise of or exchange in the tourism sector between our 2 nations. To sum it up, and I would quote Her Excellency Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, the Minister of External Affairs of India, stating that the main pillars of the Egyptian-Indian partnership is mainly based on 3 pillars, to which we are currently envisaging for more enhanced future cooperation. That's mainly intensifying our communication and the exchange of views in the political, strategic and security sphere, increasing cooperation and mutual investments in the economic and trade fields, people-to-people context and cultural exchanges. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and I leave the floor to His Excellency and Ambassador of India. Thank you.
Civilizational contacts and our contemporary ties have developed very strongly, and I believe we are on the verge, at the cusp of the moment, when we can form what we call a new partnership in the new era. As my friend Riham mentioned, our contacts are actually way old. It goes back to the time when the pyramids and the Ashokan pillar were the main pillars of our civilization. And I think they were intensified intensely in modern times when Pandit Nehru, our Prime Minister, and President Nasser led the movement for newly emerging countries to form South-South cooperation and bringing hope and aspiration not only to their own people, but to the regions around them. And I think today what we see is a new paradigm in this new century. We have new opportunities and new challenges. And it is the conviction of my government that in this new century, India and Egypt again need to take the leadership role, not only for their own people, but for the regions around them. And it's not just an opportunity, it is also a responsibility, given the very ancient culture and civilization that we both share. It is also a responsibility. As my friend Riham mentioned, the essential components of this partnership is built on 3 principal pillars. The first is the political strategic pillar, in which we need to intensify cooperation. This is a pillar on which we have great understanding and coordination and cooperation. We're excited that Egypt is now a non-permanent member of the Security Council, and we will extend it very close support in the new challenges that we face around us. We're also very confident that the new movements that are happening around us will call for greater cooperation on the security front, and we are prepared for that. The second pillar, and I think that will be the thrust of my presentation today, is the economic engagement. And we see this as a conjunction of the economic and the scientific, because in today's world, technology and innovation decide how we move our economies forward. And that will decide on how our engagement can multiply benefits, not only for our peoples, but also for the enterprises that practice them. This is something on which I will focus all my presentation as we go ahead. The third pillar, as Reham had mentioned, is the cultural contacts and people-to-people exchanges. This is the beautiful part of our relationship, and I think there are lovely things. I remember just a few weeks ago when we were celebrating the India-Africa Summit in New Delhi, and there was a cultural performance. At the conclusion of the event, there was a reception held in the presidential palace. And we had about 6 groups of cultural artists from a number of countries in Africa. And then the Tanura dancers came on stage, whirling their skirts, and it was a mesmerizing effect. And then the lights dimmed, but the Tanura dancers were still very visible because they had these psychedelic lights which were glowing, gleaming in the dark. And I think that's what gives us the inspiration that we, India and Egypt, through our cultural connections, can take this way forward. What really makes this time really good is that our official engagement has been in New Delhi. President Sisi also met with my President Pranab Mukherjee, and in these discussions, what has come out is the deep conviction on flourish. As Reham mentioned, our Foreign Office consultations will be taking place next month, to be followed by the Joint Commission at the ministerial level. Our trade ministers should meet very soon. Our Business Council has been reconstituted, the Egypt-India Business Council, and they met in Delhi on the eve of the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Sisi, and they have agreed to meet again in January or February to look at concrete program of cooperation. We see essentially 3 levels at which our cooperation will happen on the economic front, and I thought I would just run through some of the data aspects. On trade, it's actually not small. It's about $4.8 billion last year according to our data, and it has grown 60% in the last 5 years. And I'm mentioning this growth because this is at a time when global trade has not kept the pace. In other words, India-Egypt trade bucks the trend and grows faster than the growth in global trade. That's very encouraging. The second is that we are actually large partners for each other. It is often not recognized or realized that India is Egypt's 3rd largest export destination. Till last year, we were the 2nd largest trade destination. So today, there are only 2 countries to whom you export more goods and services, i.e. Italy and Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia by just 100 million more. So there is great need and desire on the part of India to buy Egyptian products. There is a market for them. The third part about our trade is that it's a very diversified basket, as you can see. We are delighted that we have fruits and citrus fruits, the fastest growing item on the Egyptian export list. There is this diversification which would actually give greater possibility of expansion of trade between the 2 countries. Finally, we are not satisfied, even though our trade is close to 5 billion, we are not satisfied with the volume. And I think we need to put in much more efforts to make this much higher. And there are certain steps that business will have to take and certain steps that the governments will have to take. About 10 years ago, we were discussing a preferential trade agreement to see whether we can have a reduction of tariffs on some of the lines. As you know, India has already negotiated FTAs with the entire ASEAN bloc, with Japan and Korea. We're on the verge of concluding it with Australia and New Zealand, and the one with EU is almost complete. So in other words, India has preferred tariff access for the bulk of the global economy. And if India and Egypt were not to get into the same framework, the trade between Egypt and India would be at a disadvantage. So we need to take steps in that. There are also certain across-the-border barriers or hurdles, let us say, and the governments on both sides are committed to trying to resolve them so that the cost of business goes down. The next part is about investments. We see trade and investments and technology as going in tandem. And this is important to look at it because the way in which the global economy has become much more integrated, it is important to take a more holistic view. As my friend mentioned, there are over 50 Indian companies that are present in Egypt. It's a fairly large spread with about $3 billion worth of investments already. And some of these companies are looking at expansion programs, and there are new companies that are coming in. They're across a range of product groups ranging from chemicals and pharmaceuticals, personal care, IT services. It's quite a broad range.